Chief Cooper, thank you so much for joining us. 2021, kind of a time like no other. People are starting to question police. Indigenous lives matter, Black lives matter, have put police under a microscope kind of like never before. Saskatoon, of course, has a large Indigenous population. What is the conversation, in your police service as this conversation about systemic racism in policing in general, the defund police, the Black Lives Matter, as those conversations are being had, what's the conversation in your police service?
That's a pretty big question, of course, and it's something that has been on our minds for quite a while. Just generally speaking, I think our relationship with the Indigenous community is something that we've been working on for probably a decade or more. But I think over the course of the last couple of years, particularly since the calls for reform that came out of the United States started to get louder and cross borders, and we've really started to focus on that relationship specifically in Saskatoon. And so I think we did our best to listen to the community, to hear what these discussions really meant locally, and then work on solutions, make sure that we had strategic plans and direction to try and answer some of those questions.
Yeah. Saskatoon certainly has a history going back 70s and 80s, kind of ground zero for the Starlight Tours. We had columnist Doug Cuthand on APTN InFocus last week. He was talking about systemic racism in policing, the defund police movements, all that. And he said things within Saskatoon have actually been improving, have come a long way since that historical strain. And he credited you, as keeping this ball moving. Sort of, what's been your approach?
Well, I think we just a recognition that this is a really critical relationship to have, and so it's been an opportunity for us to engage with the community in new ways. We have things like an Indigenous Women's Advisory Circle, for example, over the last couple of years that have been able to look at some of the things police are doing, and from that perspective, offer advice and guidance on what policing should look like. Mm-hmm. We also have had a chance, I think, over the winter to talk to our board about what it is that policing should look like. Mm-hmm. So, the defund call that we hear from the U.S. in Canada more looks like a define call, perhaps in Canada and in Saskatoon, about what the role of the police in the community should actually be. Mm-hmm. And so we've looked at some solutions there, tried to find exactly what it is that the community wants. So we looked at things like our policing crisis teams, our response to mental health. We look at things like alternative police response, where we send unarmed officers rather than just simply having one response to every time you call 911. So it's an opportunity, I think, for us to sort of look at our role, try to match what it is that our response to what the community is actually asking for.
Well, that was actually going to be my next question. Is there an appetite for to redefine kind of the role, reimagining a system in terms of who responds to certain types of calls? Police on the ground, police officers. Is there an appetite to see this sort of reimagining of roles?
Yeah, I think right now what people are asking for is sort of this co-production of community safety. So that it doesn't necessarily, we recognize that police on their own certainly are ineffective in making the community safe. Mm-hmm. And so we rely on community partnerships, and where we can expand on that, I think it's really becoming quite visibly appropriate. I mentioned police and crisis teams, but we also have partnerships that are completely outside of policing that are critical to us. In Saskatoon, we have a group called Swaya Totan, and it's an Indigenous-led outreach program, but that fills a gap in the community around addictions and mental health. Mm-hmm. Rather than just sending police to some of these calls, we've got partnerships like that now, and I think we really see their value.
Well, we thank you for taking the time to chat with us. Certainly, there's no sense in having a conversation about where policing is going to go in the future if we're not going to sit down and have the conversation with police like yourself. So we thank you for taking the time to chat with us, and we look forward to seeing where things go in Saskatoon. I'm sure we'll be talking again.
Sounds good. Thank you.